Hello and welcome to the Thousand Tales podcast. I'm your host, Connor Logan, and today, Wednesday, June 9th, I have a special reading from the Ventura County Poetry Project, of which I'm the co-host for the Newbury Park branch. And we do it every second Wednesday of every month, and then on every fourth Wednesday of every month, my co-host, Ron Fullerton, hosts the main branch library from Thousand Oaks. And the Ventura County Poetry Project is all around Ventura County with sites and readings all over. We have a wonderful group of poet laureates and a lot of creative writers that get involved. So please sit back and listen to a wonderful set of readings. And we have Peg Quinn on for this episode, doing a special reading, including some of her poems from her book that you can find on Gunpowder Press or out on Amazon. And it's called Mother Lode, L-O-D-E, Mother Lode. So please look for that and support a local poet and buy that book. It's a good value and a wonderful set of readings. So sit back, enjoy, and we'll talk to you next time.
And then I was just in a parking lot ready to pull out, and I saw this big Buick coming in, and I wrote this poem. It's titled A Note of Thanks, and it has an epigraph by Janis Joplin, who's saying, "Honey, get it while you can." A well-kept black Buick crept through the parking lot as if time no longer mattered, eventually found a spot and cautiously came to a stop. "Thank you, elderly man in hip denim jacket and worn baseball cap, who creaked in slow motion around the back to the passenger side to aid a small woman, her one daring toe touching pavement. Thank you, stylish high heel with striped sock, frail and waiting. Thank you, practiced precision, with arms gently clutched, he eased her up. When steady, she held him with a wide smile of love, while arranging a too large sweater. Oh, thank you, smile and tangled clothes. He leaned down low, eyes closed. Even their kiss was long and slow. Thank you. It made my day. And then I read this article about research that said that brightness created depression in mice. And I wondered how they knew, but it inspired this poem, disproving the data. Research advises we shut blinds tight when sleeping, as brightness creates depression in mice. Yet late that night, I woke to the moon gilding the curves of your body, spawning such pleasure we moved from moonlight to regions science can't measure. I hear someone clapping. Yay. And I had a younger brother who died fairly quickly when he was 13 and I was 18, and I was very fond of him. And it took me about 20 years to feel like I was kind of recovered from that. But then this happened. And this is titled Sunday at the Supermarket for Kenny. A casual glance at blue sky out the plate glass window, and without warning, your death surrounds me. 2 weeks after you died, Dad said, it's time things got back to normal. 50 years later, I'm shoved out of time, trying not to cry on a sunny day at the supermarket, pleading with death to grant you a pardon, begging it never happened, that you didn't fade daily in indifferent cotton, tiny blinking lights counting down your departure. And if my plea is honored, we'll drive down gravel roads to the ice cream stand, wedged on the edge of a dairy farm. Me, vanilla bean, you, chocolate. We'll trade for a taste, and when your scoop plops from its cone into my lap, we'll live forever in that laugh. Let me hear you clap, Connor. And the middle section of the book is about nature And it starts with a quote by the poet W.S. Merwin, who wrote, "And bowing, not knowing to what." And I'm sure most of you have heard this before, but it's the title poem of the book, so I'm going to read it. Motherlode. Leave wallet, phone, and garbled emotions in your car. Pocket keys. Turn to the black mulched path winding through a young field of newly minted grass. Horses' hooves pressed in moist dirt symbolize good luck. Sandpipers assembled on the beach turn in unison, face the ocean, eye its surface. Lessons lie in patterns, abalone, obsidian, a broken chambered nautilus. Down the bluff in silhouette, a row of surfers walk, boards balanced on heads, granting assurance you've entered the right place of worship. And then we have Idle God's Thunderstorm. The lumbering ocean slowly rose like an idle god who knows no measure of restraint. Waves crashed, a muffled avalanche of white froth flying like a dancer's petticoats, while the stones being herded down the shore snapped as they rolled like breaking bones. Above the distant mountains, rumbling clouds climbed and crowded, debating how to best the water's grandeur. Then the sky fell dark before a dirge of thunder. And this is my ode to a pear. Ode to a pear so yellow it penetrated through gray morning haze, surprising me with the request to please pay attention. So I stopped, felt its weight in my hand, noticed its rosy blush as if the sun had warmed its rump to perfection. Then I took in its juicy flesh. Its juicy candor, biting small chunks of light. And this is 25 words or less. It's titled To the Creator of Random Beauty. Thank you for dropping by. The black crow assessing the blustering mess of red leaves against a storm-tossed sky was a reassuring sign. And the third section of the book is focused on my childhood in rural Nebraska. And it has a quote by Willa Cather, who wrote, "Most of the material a writer works with is acquired before the age of 15. And after the book was published in January and had a reading in February, I got a lot of feedback, which was really fun. I wasn't expecting that. And one thing that really surprised me was this poem that's titled Faith, because when I wrote the poem, I wondered if people would actually understood what happened. And many people commented on that poem, this poem in particular, so I wanted to read it. So it's titled Faith. Our stampede down the dirt path stopped at the silence. Nothing so solemn to a small child as a still barn. We entered the cathedral as dust filtered through shafts of light and nervous swallows darted through rafters. A ladder rose 2 stories to a 4x4 beam. A bell rope, our swing. Bare feet gripped one knot, hands clutched another. Like a pendulum, we'd sail, waiting for the will to let go, to fall, simply fall, out of thought, out of time, to be caught by the fresh waiting meat. And these 2 poems have a story behind it that I know some of you have heard. But the first one is titled Pigs Population Control. And it really is what happened when pigs feel claustrophobic. They will attack the weakest one among them and kill the weakest until they feel comfortable with the space again. And I had submitted, Nebraska Life magazine had published a couple of my poems, and I submitted this one, and they sent back my favorite rejection letter, which was the goal of our magazine is to inspire hope and optimism. Your poem does not fill the bill. And so I'm going to read that poem and then the poem that follows this one. Pigs population control. We were finishing lunch around the dining room table when Howard shouted from the barn. We shoved our chairs in unison and ran. Sows were circling the yard, a cyclone pattern, packed tight, bellies bumping, closing in on the weakest one to solve their need for larger quarters. With short legs splayed, the runt stood braced, mouth agape, eyes rolled open, tongue frozen as it screamed and waited. Wendell marched in with a club, gripped by flashbacks of the time his friend had slipped in mud and was mauled to death. Howard strained with the heavy gait, allowing the swine some extra space, yet each required a shove before grunting away. So after Nebraska Life magazine rejected that poem because it didn't inspire hope and optimism, I was thinking about all of the strange things that happened in my childhood. And, you know, when you're a kid, you just think what happens is normal for everybody. And when I became older, I realized that this was all pretty unusual. But because of that rejection letter, I thought, well, I should write down all the other weird things that happened and turn it into a poem. And so this is titled More Childhood Stories from Nebraska Life. Nebraska Life magazine would never publish. Our 3-room schoolhouse in rural Nebraska lay on a stretch of prairie dubbed Tornado Alley. I loved the curtains running the length of the room for their pattern of cowboys on bucking broncos. Bravo to whoever made that decision. One day, Mrs. Mason, kindergarten first and second grade teacher, was tugging the drapes, yelling, "There's a tornado coming, everyone under your desks," like we practiced in the event of a nuclear bomb. But from where I stood at the back of the room, the sky was clear and blue, and I was torn between logic and terror before noticing Mrs. Kanjinsky sitting on a tree stump in her yard next to the playground, crushing a handkerchief, weeping. I slid under my desk and held on. Truth was, 8th grader Johnny Jansen, always in trouble, had once again left the playground to run through the cornfield behind the baseball diamond, which was forbidden. The same Johnny Jansen who would die 3 years later after a rifle blast ripped through the back of his head. His best friend accidentally pulled the trigger, having forgotten to unload his gun after hunting pheasants. Which reminds me of Russ Riley, smart-ass, tight pants, motorcycle madman with cigarettes cuffed in the sleeve of his tee. A James D. wannabe nobody liked, until a 4x6 beam fell from the barn loft smack on his head. Then he walked to the edge of gravel roads, pudgy and waving. And my 10-year-old friend Joey, who cut off 4 fingers with a power saw. It was a long, winding drive to the city, but he didn't feel pain for the first 20 minutes. But back to Bobby. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he tripped on the body of Mrs. Kanjinsky's 14-year-old daughter, who'd taken her dad's gun to the cornfield, having put 2 and 2 together and realized she was pregnant. Lying under my desk, trying to remember all the words to Buddy Holly's Peggy Sue, I didn't notice when another teacher told Mrs. Mason the sheriff and ambulance were on their way. I guess she thought we were slow learners, using the tornado spoof a few weeks later when Charles Starkweather, our homegrown killer, was spotted in his car heading our way. Thank you. You've heard the worst of rural life. And this is gardening, once more for my brother. The morning sun rests on my shoulders as I bend in a row of white flowers, plucking wilted blossoms, thinking of you, more than 40 years since you faded in a bed of fresh white sheets and pillows. When I'm even less than what comes after scattered ashes, you'll still matter.